Hello again, I'm Stephen Wells, the host of the Motoring Weekly podcast for the Australian Historic Road and Racing Community, and this is episode 125. Now, in episode 122, I spoke with Todd Gilmour, a concours judge for ICJAG, and he was acting as the Sydney contact for the Melbourne-based Motors and Masterpieces event that was held on the weekend of the 23rd and 24th of November. Late last week, I had a quick phone call with Todd to find out who the 10 category winners were, as Todd was one of the judges at the event. Good. So, Todd, you were at the Motors and Masterpieces down in Melbourne doing some of the judging over the weekend. What was the event like as a whole?
Yeah, it was like the standouts were the quality of cars and the vehicles that turned up. They were just seriously fantastic. And I think the other thing, the surprise was the actual venue itself. As you spoke to people as they came in, they weren't sure of how it was going to be presented or how it looked. And there was a definite come through the door, wow, sort of factor of nice surprise like that. I think that were the sort of two good things. The ease of getting the cars in and out was really good. And then at the end of the show, the bump out also extremely easy. So like definitely some good positives like that.
It was mostly undercover, was it?
Yeah, so the main event was all undercover, and then they had some club cars outside, 50 club cars outside, and 205 cars undercover. So, wow. Just especially for Melbourne weather, like not knocking Melbourne in any way, but just saying that it can be variable. And we had some hot days there of 33, 35, and then some showers on Sunday morning that cleared up, fortunately, but still it was lucky that it was all undercover. Even the 33 and 35, being those high-ceilinged sheds like that, it wasn't bad at all. Like the judges were wearing jackets all day, and it wasn't like they were trying to take them off at any point. They were fine. Good.
And then you had the trade show on the side as well. Was that indoors or was that sort of out in the open for the visitors?
Yeah, the trade shows on the side were great. There was, so if you can imagine a long rectangular room with a stage at one end of it, and then the trade shows that sort of were all the way around the edges. From distilleries to old-timer cars. They brought some of their cars that they have on their books down. So that was great to see some of those. And then, various sort of insurances or the sort of reconditioning firms that were around the outside as well.
Yeah. What was the estimate on the number of visitors? Was it more than expected? Did you feel that it was too crowded? What was the attendance like?
No, it wasn't too crowded. I think it was around about 5,000, but I'm only going off partial counts during the days. I know the Friday was definitely slow, whereas only about 500, though. There were already pre-sold 3,000 tickets before the show started. So then there was the ticket sales on the day, how they added up. But I'm thinking there was around 5,000, and yeah, probably across the 3 days.
It's still a pretty good number for an event that's over 3 days. And, that's the same as the Motor Classica, where you had to have a day that was relatively quiet because people are working, and then the weekend, people are coming in with families and getting a good look around.
Yeah, I think they were thinking, because it was kind of a springboard off Motor Classica in the past, obviously changing venue and changing name, it was going to be different for sure. It was definitely a different show. I think they thought the springboard off Motor Classica would be, I guess, similar numbers to how they were doing in mid-years, where I guess it was back to their beginning numbers again. It was back to like they were beginning.
And again, being, with a different name and some different themes, and I guess you can build on it for next year and, work on items from this year that were felt to need to be improved, and, 2025 will be bigger and better.
Yeah, that's right. I think things like that, like he's mentioned, the growth aspect of it was very good. As people came in, they wanted to say things like, oh, I'm going to bring a car next year. I'll definitely bring something. I want to contribute. I want to do something for next year. So it is that first year hurdle is a bit of a tough one. And then after that, you can already see people wanting to do things. Two people I know wanted to invest money in it. There was different things like that. So I was like, wow, that's very positive.
Yeah, it is. That's good. So there were 10 feature car show themes for the event. Can we just talk about the winners of those?
Yeah,
And we'll start with the Golden Age.
sure. The Golden Age was won by a Bentley, a 1924 Bentley Vanderplus Tourer. It was a previous winner of Motor Classic, I believe, in 2012. A spectacular looking vehicle, black with the big curved round fenders and the giant chrome grille at the front. Interesting car, how it didn't have the B on top of the radiator.
Okay.
So as they went from the WOs and transferred into then the Bentley was actually sold prior to putting the B on. So I believe the B came out in actually 24. So it was only out by, or only missed by a couple of months. But yeah, just an interesting quirk, I thought.
Yep.
Beautifully made car.
Excellent. And then in the high society?
Yeah, the high societies, there was Delage, a French car, that those curves that that you know of, those sort of deco French styles, 1931, and it was sort of a navy or a dark deep blue, then with a silver inlay at the top of it, so a two-tone paint job, convertible, spectacular looking car there, and I think it must have been a real contender for the best of show. It's one of those ones where it's, you just see it drive past, and it's a real head turner.
Yeah. And next one was La Dolce Vita.
The Dolce Vita was what I judged. That was the Ferrari Dino of Gavin King, 1971, and in an unusual colour, verde. I'm trying to think of what the first word was. Something verde, which obviously is a green, but it's a lighter green colour. There's the Dino Bible that people refer to, and in the centerfold of that book is another Dino that's in this spectacular green. He does a wonderful job, Gavin King. There's no two ways about it, and it really was a highlight for that class. Very, very noticeable winner for that class.
Great. Next one, Swinging London.
Yeah, the Swinging London. We had a 63 Bentley Flying Spur.
Okay.
Again, another beautiful, beautiful car, presented beautifully. Gary McMillan had done a lovely job on this. It's a sort of a silver or a crossover to a darker grey in between. But he had everything. He had the tools. He had all the bits and pieces. Like, not that they're judged, but gosh, he had all the equipment that went with the vehicle.
That's fantastic. That really shows commitment to getting it back to period look, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that's that extra effort that some people just try and put in, and even though they're not there for that show, they can lift up the boot, and it's still pretty spectacular even when you look in there, even though he knows they're not being judged.
Yeah, that's the whole point of doing it, isn't it? Is to get everything just correct.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, lovely.
So let's move on to the Continental Classics.
Yeah, Continental Classics. We had that's right. So all the cars minus the Italian cars, basically European cars minus the Italian cars, and it was awarded to a 1970 Mercedes-Benz 280 SL. Nice. It was a maroon topped and bodied car of that beautiful pagoda roof style, but in the 280 as well. That's the one you want, isn't it? The bigger engine and everything. Lovely number.
And then over the water to California Dreaming. Yeah,
California Dreaming was really well supported, and those interesting American cars were just spectacular. There was a T-Bird in kind of flamingo color. I know it's not called flamingo, but that was amazing. All the Mustangs were in there, and they looked fantastic. But on the day, it was a Continental that took the car out, 1956 Continental. It's written or logged right here as a Lincoln Continental, but I think it was actually delivered as just a Continental.
Yeah, the 56. I remember seeing one of those at the Black Hawk Museum up in Northern California, and they're absolutely stunning in their shape and just the whole style of them.
They are. They were obviously the expensive vehicle of the day, sort of in that transition to Ford owning them and everything like that. They just had that sort of the, not exactly Cadillac, you know what I mean? It was the class car that was getting produced in America.
Yeah, perfect. And if we then go back down to here, the Great Southern Land.
Yeah, this car was one of my definite show favourites. It was the 71 Ford, and that's an XY Falcon GT. And this car was particular in its sense where it was presented amazing. And look, you've got to take your hat off to all the Holden and Ford blokes out there who do these amazing jobs of reproductions of the stickers, and they go right through that. the engine paint, the block paint, the right blue, the tags that come off it. They're better than when they come out of the factory. They are, but just the detail, it's so accurate to what it was. And this one was a deleted striped car, so it didn't have the black stripes.
Okay.
Ordered like that. And it was ordered with a sunroof as well, which maybe that is common, but I've not seen that before. So it was a manual bucket seat sunroof GT.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I was actually looking at the Ford GTHO register this morning, and there was a comment about the deleted options in that as well, and I was quite surprised that you could go back and remove some of those, I guess, items that probably meant that it was a bit of a sleeper. It didn't look like what it was.
Yeah, and definitely the GT, the plain GT, not the Ho, was even more of a sleeper in that sense, where it didn't have the little tiny spoiler at the front or a little air dam or sort of, slightly raised pin at the back. It's just all that streamlined, simple body all the way through. Yet still with your 351 Ford muscle power in there.
All right, moving up to the Tokyo Lights.
Tokyo Lights was a huge success. The Japanese exhibition was just outstanding, and you could see it's definitely where a lot of the youth went. That's where they checked it out.
Yeah.
They walked straight in and went to those, and then the other cars around the fringes. There were some wonderful Nissan GTRs, the early ones, but the winner overall was a 71 Toyota Celica GT, and was, I believe, the Toyota principal at the time's personal car.
Okay.
And it was a fellow, Nick, who had driven that in, and his engine bay and attention to detail and was spectacular. And a lot of it where I asked about, he had these hoses that had the right coloured hoses in there, but they were, because they were the original ones. He just spends hours at night pulling the rubbers off and sitting there while in his lounge chair cleaning them up.
Perfect.
So it was a real labour of love. Spectacular car.
Yeah. And then we've got the second to last one is the Monaco Glitz. This is the modern supercars.
Yeah. TVR of Philip Allen.
Okay.
Philip's got a lovely collection of cars. 2004 modern car. There were some spectacular cars in that display, but a lot of them were display only. So they weren't competing at all. They just wanted to be there, and they didn't want to get any notoriety whatsoever. So that's sort of, it was a smaller class in terms of the judging, but not a smaller class in terms of the amount of cars that were there. So Enzo, Ferrari, McLaren Speedtail, some spectacular things like this. But it was the TVR that came through on the day, and it was pretty amazing looking car. He even went to the detail because it's clamshelled and bolted down the bonnet. So he had photos of the engine bay that had been done that week with timestamps on them, so people could see what he'd done, what work he'd done.
Was it a Griffith or a Shimura?
No, it's the TVR Tuscan.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, it's a very rare car.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Got lovely lines.
Yeah, I love those. One day I might add that to the collection.
I think a Tuscan Speed 6 maybe, if I'm...
Yeah.
I'm trying to recall everything there. Yeah.
And then the final one was the checkered flag, which was racing cars and bikes.
Yeah, that's right. And that was, Aaron Lewis, his brilliant Brabham, 1968. It was on at the Australian Grand Prix in that livery, in those colours, the BT23E. So one of the first Brabhams that raced, if not the first one that raced here in Australia. It's got a bit of a history like that, very famous history, and they had a lineup of the drivers that had driven that vehicle. And, well, again, it competed against some other great-looking race cars, but when you tie back the lineage and the history, it was the best car. Yeah.
Excellent. And were there some People's Choice Awards as well?
Yeah, there were. I'm going to go off and say the one that was handed up on the stage was handed to the McLaren Speedtail, but I have noted in social media that the People's Choice Award went to one of the Nissan GTRs, a C111. Okay. So I'm a bit confused on that one, but I'm just going off what I saw with the trophies when they handed out at the time. Yeah. And they had a Spirit of Motors and Masterpieces Award, which they gave to a Willys Overland.
Oh, okay. Ooh, nice.
One where grandfather, father and son had been working on the car up to midnight and 1:30 in the mornings before, just getting it ready just for this show. So that's why it definitely got the Spirit. It was because it was the family that had put in all the effort and the time they put in as well.
Excellent. And are you looking at doing next year's, or is that too far away?
Yeah, they have. They've already looked, well, they were talking about it at the time, about whether they'd return to that venue. There was a spectacular room upstairs which was carpeted, and that was where the Rolls-Royce and Bentley display was, and also they had a Mercedes 540K up there of prominent collector Clive Palmer. It was a wonderful looking car, and so like spaces like that were very handy, but I know they are just looking around at their options.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks, Todd. That's a good update. We spoke a couple of weeks ago about you going down and doing some of the judging, so it's actually good to cover off what happened there and the winners of each of the categories, because this is really the grassroots of the classic car scene, and it's good to be able to get an update and to share that with the listeners.
Yeah, not a problem at all. I will quickly as well just let you know the motorbikes, because there were a good 60 motorbikes of all different shapes and sizes, and that was well supported, and I think that's the big growth area for next year. The best of show was an MV Agusta 750S, and then the best British was Norton Commando, the best American was an Indian Scout, and the best preservation was a Benelli 750 SIE. So some ripper-looking, rare motorbikes there, which I think in the future the motorbikes and hopefully a few scooters can get in there as well and get their Melbourne support.
Perfect. All right, thanks, Todd. Much appreciated. We'll catch up soon, no doubt.
Thanks very much, and see you soon.
Cheers. From what I've seen online, it was a great event, and I'm sure next year will be bigger and better as they digest how the event rolled out. And I'm certainly looking forward to getting down there next November. But don't forget these upcoming events, which are great ways to get involved with the historic road and race community. Now, these all are in February. We've got the GNU Blast Classic on the 7th and 9th of February, the Motorfest Car Show by the Lions Club of Gerringong on February the 15th, and then the Sydney Harbour Concours to Elegance smack in the middle of the harbour on Cockatoo Island, 28th of February to 2nd of March. And if you have a club or event that you would like highlighted, send an email to stephen@motoringweekly.com.au and I'll be in touch. There are lots of events happening, and I'm researching when and where so that Motoring Weekly listeners can plan to attend. There's an event for every type of vehicle, it seems. And don't forget to subscribe through your favourite podcast player, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Samsung or YouTube, and get the episodes delivered as they're published. Or simply subscribe to the website motoringweekly.com.au and you can listen there. We're bouncing in the automotive podcast chart for Australia from Podcharts, who collate listener numbers from different platforms. We peaked at number 35, and I'm working on getting into the top 10 next year. Thank you to all the listeners, and I appreciate the time you spend listening to my content. I'm Stephen Wells, and you've listened to Motoring Weekly, the podcast for the Australian historic road and racing community.